So I'd like to welcome you all to this presentation, which is aimed at focusing on preparations to sit the Certified Authorization Professional exam. This is the first of multiple sessions in which we will discuss ways to look at how to interpret examination questions and how to choose the most appropriate answers. So for the agenda for this first session, we will start off by looking at the different risk management framework steps. We will start off by looking at them from an overview perspective, and then we will break each step down in a more detailed context. After that, we look at how to go about analyzing exam questions and how to choose the best answers. To do this, we utilize a sample question and the best answer, and we discuss the various options involved in each. Then we look at some additional questions and we treat those in the same way. So here then are our 6 steps for the risk management framework. Let's go through them. Step 1 is to categorize the information system and the information processed, stored, and transmitted on that system based on an impact analysis. Step 2 is to select an initial set of baseline security controls for the information system based on the security categorization. Now this also then includes tailoring and supplementing the security control baseline on an as-needed basis based on the organizational assessment of risk and the local conditions. Step 3 is to implement the security controls and to describe how the controls are employed within the information system and its environment of operation. Step 4 is to assess the security controls using appropriate assessment procedures to determine the extent to which the controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome with respect to meeting the security requirements for the system. Step 5 is to authorize the information system operation based on a determination of risk to the organizational operations, to the organizational assets, to the individuals, and to other organizational features using a decision that the risk is acceptable. Then finally, step 6 is to monitor the security controls in the information system on an ongoing basis, including assessing control effectiveness, documenting changes to the system or the environment of operation, conducting security impact analysis of the associated changes, and reporting the state of the security system to the designated organizational officials. So, let's look a little closer at the first step. Security categorization provides a structured way to determine the criticality and the sensitivity of the information being processed, stored, and transmitted by the information system. Now, the security category is based on the potential impact, mostly worst case, to an organization that should certain events occur that would jeopardize the information or the information systems, then the organization then needs to have a way to accomplish its assigned mission, to protect its assets and its individuals, and to fulfill its legal responsibilities and maintain its day-to-day operations. Now, the information owner or the information systems owner will identify the types of information associated with the information system and then assign a security impact value, usually low, medium, moderate, or high, for the security objectives of confidentiality, integrity, or availability to each information type. Now, the high watermark concept is used to determine the security impact level of the information systems for the express purpose of prioritizing information security efforts among information systems and selecting an initial set of security controls from each of the 3 control baselines. And for this, they use NIST Special Publication 853. However, in addition to NIST Special Publication 853, there are other FIPS and NIST documents that you should know about. Let's go through the ones listed here. The first of them is the Federal Information Processing Standard Publication 199. This is the standard for security categorization of Federal Information and Information Systems. Its partner document is the Federal Information Processing Standard Publication 200, which is the minimum security requirements for Federal Information and Information Systems. Now, both FIPS 199 and FIPS 200 are mandatory. Next, we have NIST Special Publication 830, which is the Guide to Conducting Risk Assessments and describes the risk management and risk assessment processes and how to prepare, conduct, and communicate the results of those risk assessment and management processes. Then we have Special Publication 837, which is the Guide to Applying the Risk Management Framework to Federal Information Systems, which is basically a security lifecycle approach to the 6 risk management framework steps that we just looked at. After that, we have NIST Special Publication 839, and this deals with managing information security risk from an organizational, mission, and information system view. It is used as part of a more complex enterprise risk management program. Next, we have NIST Special Publication 853, and this describes the security and privacy controls for Federal Information Systems and Organizations. Now, the partner document to NIST Special Publication 853 is NIST Special Publication 853A. This describes assessing security and privacy controls in Federal Information Systems and Organizations. So essentially, it describes how to assess the security and privacy controls. Next, we have NIST Special Publication 860, and this is a 2-part document. Volume 1 is the guide for mapping types of information and information systems to security categories. Then Volume 2 is the accompanying appendices. Then we have NIST 800-137. This describes the information security continuous monitoring for Federal Information Systems and Organizations. So essentially, it involves maintaining ongoing awareness of information security, of vulnerabilities, and of threats to support organizational risk management decisions. Then finally, we have NIST Special Publication 800-160, which describes the system security engineering. This is an integrated approach to building trustworthy and resilient systems using sound, secure engineering system processes and techniques. Okay, so for risk management step number 2, this is selecting your security controls. This involves identifying the security controls that are provided by the organization as common controls for organizational information systems and documenting the controls in a security plan or some equivalent document. Now, this then means selecting the security controls for the information system and documenting the controls in the security plan. Also, then you develop a strategy for the continuous monitoring of the security control effectiveness and any proposed or actual changes to the information system and its environment of operation. Finally, you're going to review and approve the security plan, including the configuration, the continuous monitoring strategy, and any required overlays or required tailoring or supplementing of those controls. Step 3 is when you implement the security controls specified in the security plan, and the security control implementation is going to be consistent with the organization's enterprise architecture and the information security architecture. Now, you also need to document the security control implementation as appropriate in the security plan, providing a functional description of the control implementation, including planned inputs, expected behavior, and expected outputs. The security control documentation will describe how the system-specific or hybrid and or common controls are implemented. For step 4, you develop, review, and approve a plan to assess the security controls. The security assessment plan will provide the objectives for the security control assessment, a detailed roadmap of how to conduct such an assessment, and the assessment procedures. You need to assess the security controls in accordance with the assessment procedures defined in the security assessment plan. Security control assessments will determine the extent to which the controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome with respect to meeting the security requirements of the information system. You need to prepare a security assessment report documenting the issues, the findings and the recommendations from the security control assessment. The results of the security control assessment, including recommendations for correcting any weaknesses or deficiencies in the controls, are then documented in the security assessment report. The security assessment report is one of 3 key documents in the security authorization package developed for authorization officials. Then you conduct initial remediation actions on the security controls based on the findings and recommendations of the security assessment report and reassess remediated controls as appropriate. In step 5, you prepare the plan of action and milestones based on the findings and recommendations of the security assessment report, excluding any remediation actions already taken. You assemble the security authorization package and you submit the package to the authorizing official for adjudication. You then determine the risk to the organizational operations, and that's going to include mission risk, function risk, image, and reputation. You're going to also then determine the risk to the organizational assets, the individuals, and other organizations or nations as appropriate. Finally, you will determine if the risk to the organizational operations, assets, individuals, organizations, or nations is acceptable. For step 6, you will determine the security impact of proposed or actual changes to the information system and its environment of operation. You need to assess a selected subset of the technical, management, and operational security controls employed within and inherited by the information system in accordance with the organization-defined monitoring strategy. You then conduct remediation actions based on the results of ongoing monitoring activities, assessment of risk, and outstanding items in the plan of action and milestones. You then update the security plan, the assessment report, and the plan of action and milestones based on the results of the continuous monitoring process. Next, you report the security status of the information system, and that's going to include the effectiveness of the security controls employed within and inherited by the system, and you report this to the authorizing official and other appropriate organizational officials as appropriate. You'll do this on an ongoing basis in accordance with the monitoring strategy. Then you review the reported security status of the information system. That's going to include the effectiveness of the controls, both inherited and employed. And you do this also on an ongoing basis in accordance with the monitoring strategy. And this is to determine whether the risk to the organizational operations, assets, individuals, or other organizations is acceptable. Then finally, you will implement an information system decommissioning strategy when needed, which is then executed as required when the system is removed from service. So let's now look at the first of our practice questions. Now, the best way to do the analysis on a question is to read the question first, then look at the answers, and then reread the question using the answers as a frame of reference. By doing this, you can then better understand what the question may be looking for. So let's go ahead and do it. The question in this case is, what was the main congressional issue or concern that drove the adoption of risk management framework? Now that we've read the question, let's look at the answers. Answer A. that the DICAP process was outdated. Answer B, that there was a need for minimum security controls baselines. Answer C, to provide a comprehensive framework. Or answer D, that risk assessment was not included in the existing certification and accreditation processes. Well, we know the question, we know the answers. Now let's go back and look at the question again. But this time when we're looking at the questions, let's now look at the language used in the question and let's single out specific keywords. Now, this question refers to issues and concerns pertaining to the risk management framework. Okay, we know that. So now let's go back to the answers. Answer A refers to DICAP being outdated. Now, DICAP was just one of the forerunners of the risk management framework process, but it wasn't the only one. DICAP is specific to the Department of Defense. Similarly, the NSA had NISCAP, which stands for the NSA CSS Information Systems Security Certification and accreditation process. And then the FBI had DCID, which stands for the Director of Central Intelligence Directives. Now, if you think about it, all three could be described as outdated. And so that's really not what the question is about. That's really not what the question is asking, is it? So let's look at question B, answer B then. Answer B pertains to the need for a minimum controls baseline. Well, there's always a need for a minimum controls baseline. But while there's a need for this need is really met by FIPS 199 and FIPS 200 documents, isn't it? This question is pertaining to risk management framework, which is the NIST 800-37 document. So again, the question doesn't pertain to this answer or vice versa. Let's skip C and go to D. Okay, the question D is that risk assessment was not included in existing certification and accreditation processes. Now, there are two things to take away from this. The first is to notice the term being used, certification and accreditation. Whenever you see that as one of the answers, that should set off a red flag by itself, because in risk management framework, those particular two processes were renamed to assessment and authorization. However, in context of this question, because it refers to pre-risk management processes, it's actually technically correct. So let's now focus on the language of the answer, specifically focusing on the fact that risk assessment is being singled out. Now, while it's true that there's particular emphasis on risk assessment in the risk management framework, it's not true that the predecessors, such as DICAP or NISCAP or DSCIDS, did not include risk assessment. They just didn't simply make it a front and center issue the way risk management framework is. So that's probably not the correct answer as well. That then leaves us with answer C, which is that the risk management framework would provide a comprehensive framework. Well, remember that our keywords are issues and concerns pertaining to risk management framework. So providing a comprehensive framework would actually fit in nicely with matching those keywords, and that would then be a good way to select the correct answer, which in fact in this case is C. So as it turns out, providing a comprehensive framework is the correct answer from the choices that were presented, but other answers may be equally applicable. For instance, risk management framework also addresses the whole concept of interconnectivity of systems. It addresses the whole concept of development of minimum controls, and it focuses to a very large degree on an increased security focus on solutions acquisitions and how they're dealt with and how agencies can choose to use those solutions. So let's look at another example question. So we read the question first using our formula. What were the underlying problems in the behaviors of the different agencies that drove to the adoption of risk management framework? Okay, we've read the question. Next step, read the answers. A, Congress required a certification and accreditation process with a unified name. B, adoption of the risk management framework was tied to the budgetary requirements. C, risk management practices were inconsistent. And D, it allowed for the definition of a common set of terminologies. Well, now let's go back and look at the question and single out keywords. In this case, we're looking at keywords such as behaviors and keywords such as different agencies and keywords such as risk management framework. Those three fitting together. Now, take those keywords, go back down and look at the answers. Answer A, Congress required a certification and accreditation process with a unified name. Well, think about the previous question. We said that whenever you see certification and accreditation, that may set off red flags for you because it should be assessment and authorization if we're talking about risk management framework. However, again, we're talking about pre-risk management framework, so it's allowable. But in this case, what's it asking? It's saying, okay, we needed a unified name. Well, if you think about it, it wasn't so much that you needed a unified name. You needed a unified set of way of doing things. That's really what drove to the adoption. Okay, so that's why then they took DIACAP and DSCIDS and all the other types certification accreditation processes and said, okay, we no longer use those. We're now going to adopt risk management framework as a unified way of doing things. So it wasn't really about the name. Okay. B, the adoption of risk management framework was tied to budgetary requirements. Well, yes, risk management framework did put more emphasis on the fact that you had to have a budget, that you had to be able to pay for your security controls and your security assessments and everything else that had to do with the whole concept of implementing a security environment. But it didn't necessarily mean that the framework was tied to that. That was just part of the requirements from the framework. Let's look at D. It allowed for the definition of a common set of terminologies. Now, we're talking about bringing different agencies together, so wow, this could be true, couldn't it? It's if you can define a common set of terminologies that all the different frameworks can use, then that could be helpful. But again, is it something that drove to the adoption of the risk management framework? Probably not. Probably it wasn't strong enough. Let's look at C. Risk management practices were inconsistent. Now, this is hitting more to the core of the issues because remember, one of our keywords was behaviors. Practices are types of behaviors exercised by different agencies, and if there's inconsistency among different agencies in the way they do things, then a good solution is to find a way to bring them together, and that's what risk management framework does. And so C then would be the correct answer in this case. Now, some of the questions that you may encounter could be described as bordering on the darn right sneaky side of things. This might be construed as an example of one such question, because what it's doing is it's banking on the fact that you, as the exam taker, may or may not have done the correct amount of adherence to knowing your documents correctly. And so you may know that the answer is somewhere in the ballpark of a given content, but maybe it's not exactly there. So let's use our formula. Read the question. Which Department of Defense document introduced the term cybersecurity? Okay, so two keywords, Department of Defense and cybersecurity. Next are answers. DOD-I 8500.01, DOD-D 8500.1, DOD-I 8510.01, DODD 85002. So the question is obviously banking on the fact that you know the answer is probably going to be something in the 85,000 series. But which one? Oh gosh. Well, two things to look at here. First of all, we know it's a DoD document. DODI stands for Department of Defense Instruction. DODD stands for Department of Defense Directive. So really, telling between those two doesn't really help. Both are DoD documents. So this then comes down to the fact, do you know the correct titles for the different documents? Because that's really what this question hinges on. If we start with answer B, DoD 8500.1, this in fact is the title of that document is Information Assurance, and this was the policy document that described the old Department of Defense Information Assurance certification and accreditation process, formerly known as, well, still known as DIACAP. So 8500.1 is the policy aspect of DIACAP. Then answer D, 8500.2 is the standards or the implementation side of things, because the correct title for 8500.2 is Information Assurance Implementation. So those two go hand in hand. Now, both of them contain the term information assurance. One of the things that we know Risk Management Framework does is it replaces the term information assurance with the term cybersecurity. So B and D are out of the picture. That leaves A and C. DoD I 8500.01 and DoD 8510.01. Now, 8510.01 is the risk management framework for Department of Defense Information Technology. It's essentially a standards or an implementation type document, and it describes how to implement the policies defined in DoD I 8500.01, and guess what? The title of DoD I 8500.01 just happens to be, yes, you guessed it, cybersecurity. So the answer in this case is going to be cybersecurity. Or, if you like, answer A. Here's another one where the creators of the question would be banking on the fact that you may or may not properly know your documents. So, using our formula, let's read the question. Which National Institute of Standards Technology, i.e. NIST, document describes the implementation of continuous monitoring controls? Okay, so keywords there are obviously NIST and continuous monitoring and controls. Well, all four choices are NIST, so that doesn't help us. So let's go through. And really, this is a question of knowing your documents, knowing which one is applicable. NIST Special Publication 837 could very well be applicable because it is the guide to applying the risk management framework to federal information systems. So it's really a security lifecycle approach to the 6 risk management framework steps. Now, one of those steps is, guess what? Continuous monitoring. And it's talking about how to do this stuff. So that could be our answer. Let's look at B. NIST Special Publication 853A. This is the document that describes assessing security and privacy controls in the federal information systems and organizations. So this describes how to assess the security and privacy controls that have been implemented. One of our keywords from our question is controls, and some of those controls are continuous monitoring. So again, that could be possible. Let's skip to D, NIST Special Publication 800-160. This is the system security engineering document. It is a life cycle approach to using the the secure principles and secure concepts and secure activities within a secure systems engineering lifecycle approach to create trustworthy and resilient systems. So of the three reviewed so far, it's probably the odd man out because it's looking at a design perspective of things. Answer C is NIST Special Publication 800-137. Now this, if you know the title, is Information Security Continuous Monitoring for Federal Information Systems and Organizations. What does it do? It describes how to do continuous monitoring and defines information security continuous monitoring controls. Whoa, that kind of sounds like it might be our boy, doesn't it? It's so again, it's a question of knowing your content, but then looking at the answer and trying to figure out what's being asked. Obviously, in this case, C is the correct answer. And so to review, our answers for our additional questions were C, risk management practices being inconsistent, A, DoD instruction 85,000.01, the title of which is cybersecurity, and question 3C, the NIST Special Publication 800-137, which is the Information Security Continuous Monitoring for Federal Information Systems and Organizations. That's a mouthful. All of this information can be, and much, much more, can be found in the CAP Preparation Session 1. And so I would encourage you to go and read those notes and learn more about this stuff. Thank you for your time.